Hello everybody, I'm Art, ex-family disgrace, ex-scapegoat, the black sheep of the family, the bad character, the one who apparently ruins families just by existing. Because of course, my evil character transcends the devil himself. And naturally, it goes without saying that I've always been unworthy of a mother's love, especially since around the age of 9. And yet somehow, and this is not for a lack of irony, I was also destined to play the role of my mother's unpaid therapist, psychologist, nurse, best friend, all rolled into one. Starting at around the age of 9, I was put on this earth to be her little pain sponge, to absorb it all. And I was tasked with carrying her victimhood as my own burden. Learning early on that my job was not just to survive my family's system as a scapegoat, but to hold the weight of someone else's life and somehow make it look like my fault when I failed to appease her, when I failed to fulfill her unmet needs, to heal her. We're mandated to carry our abuser's pain on our shoulders, and this is not just any pain, but the pain of an adult with serious mental health issues, with a personality disorder, who should have sought help from a mental health professional and not used their own child as an emotional relief system. When we grow up like this, we don't just carry the pain of the dynamic we have with a parent who can't see us or connect with us on any level, and who abuses us because of the way they feel inside. But we end up carrying the pain of every single family member we watch being manipulated and destroyed by this dynamic. And because of that training, this doesn't stop there. We grow up absorbing and carrying the pain of everyone around us because this is what we've been trained to do. Now, empathy in itself is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing. It really is. And it's one of the most powerful gifts a human being can have. And we could definitely use more empaths right now, especially with all the suffering that's going on in the world. And I will be talking to you about how to use this empathy healthily. But before we get there, we need to confront the dark side of empathy. Because the truth is, when we use empathy the wrong way, and yes, there is a wrong way to use it, it can give narcissists all the power. And it can drain us, it can exhaust us, and it can make us unable to say no, unable to set boundaries, and unable to protect yourselves from harm. Now, as a scapegoat, you don't just grow up healthily and you don't just walk around your house and, I'm going to turn on the TV or I'm going to make myself a sandwich. You can't do that. You grew up scanning and watching the room. You scan every face, every micro expression, every shift in tone, watching and waiting, anticipating the next explosion, which always comes. When I was a child and growing up, teenagehood, I could tell what kind of a day it was, as I know all of you scapegoated survivors can. Just from the way my mother walked, the way that she would turn her head, the way that she sat, everything about her body language could give me all the information I needed on whether I needed to run and get the hell out of my house as fast as possible or not. And the explosions always came. In my experience, they were almost cyclical. She would have a good day, but then the tension would build and build and build and build until she would explode and try and find anything she could latch on to, anything at all, even though I wasn't doing anything that deserved this. Well, nobody deserves this kind of explosion, but I could be reading a book, and she would come and she would explode at me. And then once she felt the relief, it didn't end there. She would then go to my family, my father. She would make phone calls to relatives who live abroad in Poland, and she would tell them how terrible and evil I was. And this was the cycle of my life. And This will cause hypervigilance. You learn to read the room before you can even read your own feelings. You learn to read other people's feelings before you can even connect with your own. You do not have permission to connect with your own feelings. You can't do that because you get punished if you do. And that skill sticks. Even years later, you're still on high alert, even when there's no threat. You still walk into a room and you can tell, what's going on from micro expressions. If somebody is hurting, is somebody angry, is somebody joyful, you can tell. You develop this ability because you've been trained to do it at home. And from this training that we went through also comes the fixer mentality, because you can't fix everyone's problems, but if you could fix everybody's problems, then maybe you'll finally be safe. Maybe if you cheer them, if you soothe them, if you carry their stress for them, they'll leave you alone. But the irony is that the more that you try and fix, the more that they break. The more empathy you give them, the more they actually utilize that as a wide open door for them to continue abusing, because they know they can, because they know you'll take it. And then there's the projection. There's the projections, right? Scapegoats become the family's emotional dumpsters. You get handed the anger and the shame and the insecurities, everything that's wrong, everything that the narcissistic parent hates about themselves. And because you were trained to carry this on your shoulders, you don't just take it, but you actually start believing that all of this dysfunction is actually yours. Suddenly, you're not just holding their pain, you're owning it. And it gets stuck in your system. Now, this empathy, this survival system that you built, it can actually turn against you. And when it does, it doesn't just drain you, it becomes a weapon in other people's hands. Narcissists love empaths. They are attracted to us like magnets. When you're wired to feel other people's pain, manipulators love you because they're expert at manipulating emotions. So if you step back and look at the logic of every abusive situation that you've ever seen or been through, logically, if you look at it, you know you need to leave. You know that you're mistreated. You know that person's mistreated. You know that something's wrong. You know that there's pain and that somebody is causing you or that person pain, and yet we stay or they stay, and not because of logic, but because they become emotionally trapped. It's like a bug stuck on a spider web, okay? And they know that all they have to do is like sigh heavily, my life, make a sad face, drop a guilt trip, cry in front of you about how everything is so terrible and the world is turning against them, and yes, they have done terrible things, but that's because they had a terrible childhood and blah 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 blah, okay? And then you're hooked. And you'll bend over backwards trying to fix them, because this is what we've been trained to do since childhood, okay? We try to fix people that hurt us and abuse us, okay? Because we've been trained to do that since childhood. And they will get your free emotional labor and you get exhaustion. And at the end of the day, this is not actually helping anybody. But I'll get to that in a second. Another point I want to make is when things go wrong. Once you've helped everybody, that person, once, when you try to help the person, you sacrifice yourself for that person, But if something goes wrong, if you don't do it correctly, if you don't successfully soothe their pain, then they will turn around and they will blame you for failing them. They will blame you for failing them, because you're not just meant to carry their emotions, you're actually carrying their failures too, okay? They will erupt at you if you can't fix them enough. And that's the thing, is that once you're sucked in and you're emotionally invested and you lose sight of anything logical and your emotions rule everything that you do, it's so easy for us scapegoats to start thinking, Maybe if I did it differently, maybe if I tried harder, maybe if I had more empathy for this person, maybe my love can save this person, you know? And that voice isn't even your voice. It's what you've been trained to do. It's what you've been trained to do at home, to take more abuse and take more abuse and take more abuse, hoping that you could soothe or heal someone with your love. And this is something that will never happen because that person has no intention on healing. They have no intention on doing anything to help themselves, okay? Their intention is just to take the easy road and continue to use you and to suck you in and to have you serve them so that they can continue behaving the way that they do. And that leads to another danger of this toxic empathy, and that's the boundary erosion. Empathy without boundaries is like you're leaving the door wide open with a sign that says, come and dump your trauma here. I'm available 24/7. I don't have a life. I don't matter. Just come in and suck my soul. Take it. Take my soul. Just take everything. Take everything. You know? You sacrifice your energy, your time, your sanity, all in the name of keeping the peace or appeasing somebody else's inner chaos. But there is no peace. This is just you running around draining yourself for people who oftentimes are just using you for what you can give them. Now, empathy in itself is not the villain here, okay? That's not what I'm saying. The problem is when it runs on autopilot, okay? Your empathy will be triggered on people that are toxic, but that actually need healthy consequences to get better. Your empathy is not going to help people who refuse to help themselves, okay? They need healthy consequences to get better because consequences are teachers of life, okay? You have to have consequences in life to teach people how to live and how to not hurt other people. There's a consequence, okay? You caused pain and, you did something that was wrong and therefore you need to own up to what you did, okay? Consequences are teachers of life, okay? So, for example, if a person is dating an alcoholic or a drug addict and the addict has a tantrum, if they don't go to fix, if they don't lend them money so that they can get their fix, or if they don't help them, supply their alcohol or whatever, if they don't give them money, and maybe within that moment, as the empaths, if they provide the addict their drug or their fix or money for whatever they need, they might see relief on the addict's face, like, I'm not in pain anymore, thank you, nobody understands my pain. But what they're actually doing is killing them. They're helping them self-destruct through toxic empathy. I once had a situation like this in my life. I actually once dated a person who was a crack addict, and I didn't know that this person was a crack addict. This person love bombed me, and I never would have guessed. Because this is a person that we used to go to the gym together. This was a very healthy looking, buffed kind of guy. We went like off-roading. He was into like nature and stuff like that. But then, after he love bombed me and I moved in with him, the very erratic behaviors started to emerge, and there was violent behavior. There was terrible things I'm not going to talk about, but eventually I also found the stash and I found the crack pipe, And when I left this person, what came out was, I'm going to kill myself if you leave. I'm not going to stop doing drugs if you leave, because I have no reason to stop using if you leave. If you come back, maybe I'll stop. But I have no reason to quit if you leave me. And if I don't quit, it's your fault because you left me, and so on, so on, so on. This is a tactic that people will use to keep you in their life so that they can continue doing what they're doing without healing. Now, thankfully, in this situation, I actually had support to get out of that. And, I found out the history of that person is that there had been attempts to do an intervention for that person many times, and they hid it from everybody that they kept doing the drugs and such. And so, I realized at that point that coming back was not what that person needed, but that was because I was surrounded by people who helped me see what was going on. Emotionally, I was ready to go back in a heartbeat. I was ready to go back because I felt incredible sadness for this person who actually had a lot of trauma in their life. Okay, and that's the thing. That person had legitimate trauma in their life. But that doesn't mean that what they're doing is okay. And that doesn't mean that enabling bad behavior is okay because they had trauma, okay? It's so much more important to teach them healthy consequences so that they actually can heal than to enable this self-destructive behavior. It's so important for you to start building resilience, okay? Because people will try to project their junk onto you. That's what toxic people do. Okay, so it's so important to teach yourself to have healthy boundaries for yourself and to not lose yourself. Everybody has their own mind, their own history, their own story. Everybody has their own inner world, their own experiences, and everybody will, experience life differently. Think about a strawberry, for example. You might bite into one and think, okay, this is sweet and juicy and perfect and I love strawberries. But somebody else will bite into one and they hate strawberries. They hate the texture, the taste, they hate everything about it, okay? It's a disgusting strawberry, Now, if I tell you I hate this strawberry, I hate it, it gives me disgust, I can't stand it. You don't leave your strawberry bowl because someone else doesn't eat theirs. So your experience is through your own senses, your own taste buds, your own mind, okay? Emotions work the same way. Someone else's anger, guilt, or sadness isn't yours just because they project it onto you. And it's so important to differentiate that, like what you feel versus how they feel, and have a healthy boundary between the two so that you don't forget yourself in the process. You can acknowledge it, even feel it. It's normal, if I see something sad, I will feel sad too, okay? But that doesn't mean that I'm going to absorb it and get stuck with it to a point where I feel like, if I don't kill myself for this person, I will never find peace, because I'm not a god. Empathy itself is a gift, the ability to feel and understand when someone else is experiencing. This is really rare, but raw empathy like this without guidance, it can be hijacked by toxic people and it can feel like a curse. Your empathy will become a superpower, when you learn to wield it deliberately. You're still empathetic, you still understand, you still feel, but now you decide where, when, and with whom that you engage. And you're gonna have so much more healthier energy to give when you do it selectively, and you will not feel consistently drained. Self-protection isn't the opposite of empathy. It's the harnessing of it. It's what lets you use your empathy without getting drained or exploited. So you actually have a healthier dose of empathy to give when you're not drained, when you've taken care of yourself, when you're full, okay? And I got something for you to think about. How about you harness that empathy that you hold and you use it towards self-compassion, towards yourself, towards your inner child who really, really, really needs you to pay attention to them a lot more than the attention that you pay to other people. You have never been permitted to feel your own feelings. Your entire life has been, you've been given the role to serve, somebody who abused you, a family system who abused you. Everything about your upbringing was always about looking at other people's feelings and how they feel and what you can do to prevent explosions from happening. So how about now you actually take that empathy and you turn it towards yourself And you give yourself a period of time where you actually really only focus on yourself and your needs and your wants and your inner child and your healing, okay? No matter what goes out around you, you focus on yourself for some time. I'm saying this because this is what scapegoats struggle with the most. You've been trained to care for everyone by yourself. But the real healing happens when you actually flip that script, when you treat yourself with the same tenderness, the same patience you've been handing out to everyone else for free. Okay? Imagine what would happen if you actually gave yourself even half of the empathy that you've been giving away. Okay? And at some point, you have to realize that the family job description of designated pain carrier was actually never yours to begin with. That's when boundaries come in. And boundaries aren't you being rude or cold, because of course, for us, empaths, guilt is triggered so easily. And we are made to feel guilty when we set boundaries. But boundaries aren't rude, they're survival, they're a need. They're you saying, no, I can't do this today because if I do this, I will get hurt, I will be drained, I will have a lack, okay? I can't do this today. And protecting your emotional energy is really the most important thing, especially after you've been traumatized by a narcissistic family system and growing up in a dysfunctional family. Now there's a skill, that skill that you learned, since you were young, to scan the room and detect all the micro expressions and detect, everybody's mood and determining who needs like soothing in that moment. You can actually use that superpower, not for danger, not to detect danger or conflict. Of course, it's important, but actually use it also for reciprocity. You can, pay attention to the people that actually listen to you as much as they talk about themselves, okay? Who care about your feelings instead of, having you constantly serve them and their feelings, okay? Pay attention to relationships where empathy actually flows both ways instead of draining you in one direction. So use those skills that you learned, okay? You can actually use those skills, but actually hone in on trying to find out who is actually healthy for you. Who is actually healthy for you. And you may notice that as an empath and also raised in a toxic environment, that sometimes you are surrounded by people who drain you, and sometimes it's actually healthier to just cut everybody off and restart from the beginning. Because what happens when you say no, when you say boundary, even if you do it really nicely, you do it in a way that's pleasant, you smile out, I'd love to help you today, but I actually can't because of whatever. Even if you do, if you follow all the rules, okay, of behaving, you'll notice that toxic people will shun you, they will disown you, they will ghost you, okay, as soon as you actually set a healthy boundary for yourself, okay? Toxic people are going to get angry at you when you set boundaries, and because you're an empath, you're going to question yourself, and you're going to say, oh my God, am I the bad guy? Is it true that I'm not there? Like something within will stir, when you try and set healthy boundaries for yourself. And this is how we get stuck in these cycles. So, transform your empathy and everything that you learned into something that will empower you. Your sensitivity keeps you connected to the truth. And your resilience, you've been through all this and it's unmatched. You survived what was designed to break you, okay? That's not weakness, that's power. So remember that breaking the cycle is also setting healthy boundaries and becoming mindful of how you use that wonderful, wonderful empathy that you have in your heart. It is a great, great superpower, and it's so important that you keep it. But don't let people drain it out of you. Don't let people drain it out of you, okay? Because that will unfortunately hurt you to a point where you no longer will be able to function because you'll be too drained, and we don't want that. We want empaths to be healthy. We need more empaths to rule the world right now, and we need you to be healthy and strong and connected, especially connected to yourself, connected to your inner world, connected to your own feelings, okay? Use your empathy to connect with yourself. Give yourself that empathy that you deserve first, and then you can pay attention to the world around you, and you do it selectively. So that's it for today, guys. I hope this helped you. Remember, I love myself, I trust myself, and I'll see you soon.